Socrates was the classical Greek thinker who is widely regarded as the founder of modern Western philosophy. As a citizen of Athens, Socrates' style of questioning authority and challenging social and political conventions made him a controversial figure, so much so that he was eventually condemned to death by his fellow Athenians. Because Socrates did not write down his thoughts, relying instead on dialogue, historians must rely on other sources, primarily Plato, Xenophon, and Aristotle, to understand his philosophy and approach to life. Apparently, Socrates was committed to a simplistic way of living. He did not have a job and would not take money for teaching. He openly associated with women and common citizens. Socrates participated in 3 military campaigns, distinguishing himself with bravery, physical vitality, and Spartan-like indifference to the harshness of military life. Historical sources characterize Socrates as unattractive and short in stature. He was married to Xantippe, of whom very little is known as historical fact. Yet Xantippe has received an unflattering characterization throughout the ages as a bit harsh and argumentative, traits that are noted in some Casey readings that describe the family and household of the eccentric philosopher. Although the Casey material does not include readings for anyone with a past life as Socrates, there are several readings for those who were close to the philosopher. Gertrude Casey, Edgar's wife, was told that she had lived as Normaline, the second daughter of Socrates. Based on the reading's description of Normaline's mother and the household in which she grew up, perhaps Socrates fathered at least 2 daughters, probably by Xantippe. As has been noted, the historical data on Socrates' life and family is somewhat sketchy, so the possibility that Normaline was an unrecorded offspring of Socrates and Xantippe is plausible. Or perhaps Socrates sired daughters by another woman. Some accounts suggest that he may have had a second wife. From her father, Normaline gained the ability and power of reasoning. From this past life, her soul entity gained the ability to analyze and urge for knowledge and understanding, and the principle of right for all and no exception, which carried over into her 20th century incarnation. Her readings also noted that the tendency for reasoning and attraction to the material side of life could be a hindrance to the greater expression of spirituality in her present life. As Normaline grew up in ancient Athens, she suffered greatly from the persecution directed at the household and family of Socrates. From her mother, she developed a propensity to question and complain because of the lack of material things and conditions. Her readings suggest that her mother may have had a stronger influence, producing a tendency to focus on the material side of life, bordering on self-centeredness at times, as she constantly harped on the hardships of life. Thus, the influence of Socrates was hindered from being fully manifested in Normaline. Her readings encouraged her to quiet herself within, and to use her abilities to reason the relationships and conditions of her life from the inmost soul forces. In terms of appearance, the readings describe Normaline as the typical Grecian type of dark complexion. Physically, she was not fully developed due to the material hardships of that experience. Psychologically, she was fearful of tirades, either from her mother or from others in reaction to her mother. She was always in wonderment throughout the experience. She found herself with mixed emotions at the death of Socrates. Naturally, there were periods of mourning for her deceased father, but there was also rejoicing at the passing of Socrates and a lessening of the persecutions from outside the family. Thus, she was able to move out into society and make her own life. In one of her readings, Mrs. Casey asked about the contacts she may have had with some of the notable individuals who were alive at the time of Normaline. Her reading noted that she had served as a nurse and caretaker of Alexander, whom we will discuss in a later section. Normaline became acquainted with Xenophon when she visited her mother at his household. Thus, the connection with Xenophon provided for increased material conditions for the family of the deceased Socrates. In 1926, a 22-year-old woman was given a reading stating that the greatest development in any of her earthly lives occurred in ancient Greece when she was a servant in the household of Socrates. In the name Areiel, she learned from that great teacher how to attend to the mental forces from within. Although she suffered material hardships along with the others in her household, she understood the principles of truth that applied to everyone, regardless of creed, sex, age, position, or class. As a witness to the constant badgering of Socrates by Xanthippe, she learned another lesson, that women should listen and reason rather than nag. Beyond the immediate household of Socrates, the Casey readings include several individuals who had past lives during that period. In 1930, a 15-year-old girl was told by the entranced Casey that she had a past life during the days of the soldier teacher Socrates. As Astrioid, she had been a member of the household of someone taught by the great teacher, and eventually herself became a student of Socrates. Casey noted that songs and sonnets written by Astrioid could yet be found. Thus, in her modern life, she had a special interest in Grecian plays, costumes, or anything pertaining to that period. A 34-year-old secretary was told that she had lived as Gracian of the household of one Pontius. During that incarnation, she became a follower of Socrates' school and a good listener, a trait carried forward into her present life. A 36-year-old manufacturer of auto accessories was told that he had once lived in Greece during Socrates' era. As Onreron, he had been an astrologer and physician. From that past life, he gained an urge for knowledge of the universe and universal forces, combined with the mental abilities to grasp such expansive concepts. A 37-year-old housewife was told that she had lived as Eloise during the time of Socrates. Eloise accepted Socrates' philosophy during that life, and in her modern life possessed exceptional reasoning abilities. Whatever was presented to her must have some rational basis for consideration. She found her past life name, Eloise, to be very evocative and developed a keen interest in ancient Greek studies, which she pursued for her mental and spiritual development. A 21-year-old man received a reading that described a past life during the time of Socrates, the great teacher who gave himself for an ideal, the freedom of man in thought and speech in every aspect of life. During that incarnation, the influence of Socrates enabled him to be of service to many in the healing arts. Not what we would call a doctor or physician, but simply a person who used whatever was at hand to assist others in healing. He gained in the experience to others, but lost when he succumbed to holding grudges and belittling those with less understanding. Naturally, these tendencies were carried over and would have to be met in his modern life. In 1930, a 50-year-old retired businessman received a reading stating that he had lived during Socrates' period in ancient Greece. In the name Astrioidal, he was one who persecuted Socrates and his followers. Initially, he gained materially from his efforts to suppress the teachings of Socrates. However, as he studied Socrates' ideas more deeply, he became convinced of the truthfulness and even became a supporter and teacher of same. With this change of direction, he suffered in a material sense, but gained in the mental and spiritual development. The lesson learned from that lifetime that carried over into his modern life was that with proper mental and spiritual application, the material affairs of life will take care of themselves. A 45-year-old social science teacher was told that he had a past life as Shanto, one who reasoned with Socrates. From that experience, he carried forward the mental capacity to confront those in authority as necessary for the greater good. This soul pattern was useful in a later life as an associate of Thomas Paine, and one who influenced Thomas Jefferson, the primary author of the Declaration of Independence during the American Revolution. Socrates would have loved that. Socrates would probably also felt right at home in America during the radical social movement of the 1960s, questioning authority and corrupting the minds of the young. The next case from Casey's reading certainly has a bit of that revolutionary flavor. A reading for a 2-year-old girl stated that in her past life in Greece at the time of Socrates, she had lived as Zenobian. Zenobia was so influenced by the teachings of Socrates that she became outspoken in her self-expression, leading to some form of suppression by those in authority. At a time when Greek athletics was a male-dominated activity, she had tried to participate and became injured. Perhaps she was an example of the charge of corruption of youth that was put forth by some of Socrates' critics, the charge that eventually led to his death. Her readings stated that she had gained mentally and spiritually from that lifetime, and that these qualities could be carried into her modern life as a debater, lecturer, or writer with great success. Her parents were told that during adolescence she would assert herself in no uncertain terms, thus the need to direct her constructively during childhood. Her parents were also cautioned that the athletic injury she had suffered in ancient Greece would produce a vulnerability to disease or accident in her feet or lower limbs during childhood years. A reading given for a 30-year-old psychologist indicated that the man had been one of the Athenian citizens who voted to have Socrates put to death, so that he would not undermine the youth of the land. In the name Angonasto, the man later regretted his choice, as he was greatly disturbed about how the affair played out. He lived the rest of his life with the desire and hope that he could somehow undo the judgment that he had passed on Socrates. His reading noted that his decision had been based on fear rather than mental or spiritual conviction. In his modern life, Casey suggested that he teach himself through meditation to become a better listener to others and to remember that with what measure he judges others will be meted in return to him. With regard to the death of Socrates, one Casey reading describes Socrates as one who had turned the world, as it were, or the earth world mentally, upside down by drinking the hemlock. Casey observed that Socrates drank the hemlock for a purpose. It was not, as the historian Xenophon had supposed, as a means of avoiding the infirmities of old age. Rather, Socrates died for an ideal.